Welcome, everybody. Welcome to folks who are joining us. We're going to give it just a minute or two as people are still joining before we get started. Welcome, folks. People are still joining, so we're just going to give it another minute. Okay. Welcome, everybody. I think we'll get started. My name is Jody Sugarman-Brozan, and I'm a Deputy Chief in the Worker Empowerment Cabinet here at the City of Boston. Thank you for joining us this evening. Before we get started, we are going to ask each of our interpreters. Tonight's webinar will be translated into 5 languages, and we want to give our interpreters an opportunity to tell people how to join the channel so that you can be sure to understand all the great speakers we have lined up tonight. Monique, can you turn to thank you. So I'm going to give each of our interpreters an opportunity just to say in their language how to join interpretation. Could I have the Brazilian Portuguese interpreter introduce themselves?
Hello, hi, this is Bertolds Cantalis, and I will be doing the Brazilian Portuguese interpretation tonight. Hello, can you hear me now?
Is the Brazilian Portuguese interpreter, could you come back onto this channel and introduce yourself and tell folks how to join your channel? Shanique, maybe you need to turn interpretation on now that you're the host.
Just a sec, Jody, sorry.
Sorry, no worries. I am seeing the opportunity to join.
Interpretation.
Do
Okay,
we want to
can you give it another try?
We might have to turn it off for people to be able to introduce themselves and then turn it back on.
Yep. Will do. Just a sec, sorry.
Thank you. We've had quite a few people join since then, so. Okay. Shanique, you let me know when we're ready.
Will do. So sorry for the delay.
Welcome, folks. We're just getting interpretation ready so that our interpreters can introduce themselves and make sure everybody can join on the correct channel.
जो पनि इन्टरप्रेटरको सेटिङ मिलाउँदैछौँ तपाईँ आउनुभएको छ भने sorry. Okay.
Excellent. All right. I think, thank you. Welcome interpreters. We will let folks, now we will let folks introduce themselves. Could the Brazilian Portuguese interpreter introduce themselves and let folks know how to join the channel?
Sim, boa noite a todos. Aqui é o intérprete de português do Brasil. Para interpretação em português, por favor, vá à barra de controle horizontal na parte inferior da tela e clique onde está escrito Interpretation. Em seguida, você clica no idioma que deseja ouvir e aí você já deve estar acessando a sala em reunião em português e conseguir ouvir a minha interpretação. Muito obrigado.
Thank you. Could I ask our Cantonese interpreter to introduce themselves?
Hi, everybody. My name is Terry. I'll be your Cantonese interpreter for this meeting tonight. 大家好，我係 Terry，我係你哋嘅廣東話翻譯。咁一陣咧，你會睇個屏幕下邊見到一個地球儀嘅圖標啦。你點落去咧之後咧，再揀 Chinese 就可以聽到廣東話嘅頻道啦。咁如果你係用手機或者 iPad 上嚟嘅話咧，你可以點下屏幕下邊嘅3個點，再揀呢個語言翻譯嘅功能，亦都可以入到Chinese 即係廣東話嘅頻道。好，我哋一陣見。Thank you.
Thank you. Could I have our Haitian Creole interpreter introduce themselves, please?
Hi everyone, my name is Esther and I am the Haitian Creole interpreter. Bonsoir tout le monde, moi c'est Esther et c'est moi-même qui interprète créole haïtien et que si que nous avons besoin d'interprétation en créole haïtien, nous sommes capables d'aller dans le contrôle là en bas, écran, et puis nous sommes capables de cliquer sur interprétation. Après nous finissons faire ça, nous finissons cliquer sur langue nous t'arrêtons maintenant, nous sommes capables d'avoir accès à la réunion en créole haïtien. Merci.
Thank you. Could I have our Spanish interpreter introduce themselves, please?
Hi, good evening. My name is Emily Getchell, and I will be the Spanish interpreter this evening. Buenas noches a todo el mundo. Mi nombre es Emily Getchell. Estoy aquí para proporcionar servicios de interpretación. En un momentico se va a encender la función, así puede simplemente ubicarse al fondo de su ventana de Zoom y ahí hacer clic en el icono del globo para acceder interpretación. Si se está conectando con móvil, empuje los 3 puntitos, de ahí escoge Interpretation, pues español o Spanish, pues done o listo y ya está en el canal. Si tiene dificultad, por favor, comunícase con nosotros en el chat.
Thank you. And could I have our Nepali interpreter introduce themselves, please?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vishnu. I will be the Nepali interpreter for tonight. Namaste, हजुर सबैजनालाई म चाहिँ तपाईहरुको नेपाली दोभाषी हुनेछु मेरो नाम विष्णु तपाई कम्प्युटर चलाउँदै हुनुहुन्छ भने कम्प्युटर स्क्रिनको तल बारमा गएर त्यो पृथ्वीको गोलो नक्सालाई थिच्नु होला अनि त्यसपछि यदि तपाई फोनमा हुनुहुन्छ भने चाहिँ त्यो मोर लेखेको ठाउँमा 3वटा थोप्लो छ त्यो 3वटा थोप्लो ठाडो थोप्लो छ त्यसमा थिच्नु होला अनि त्यसपछि इन्टरप्रिटेसन भन्ने शब्द आउँछ त्यसलाई छान्नुहोस् अनि तपाईले सुन्न चाहेको भाषा रोज्नु होला त्यो नेपाली हुन्छ त्यसपछि यो मिटिङ हजुरले नेपालीमा सुन्न सक्नुहुन्छ हस् नमस्ते
Thank you. So we'll turn the interpretation function on. For those folks should be able to now select their language. If you're on a phone, you may have to hit the 3 dots for more to be able to join interpretation. And I want to thank all of our interpreters. It is it's National Interpreter Appreciation Day. So thank you all for being with us this evening. We really appreciate your being willing to be with us, including our ASL interpreters. So thank you everybody for joining. I want to remind folks to speak slowly for our interpreters. We have a great group of panelists tonight, and we are very fortunate also to be partnering with a number of worker centers. Before we get started though, we are very lucky to have the City of Boston's Chief of Worker Empowerment, Trin Nguyen, with us this evening for a welcome. Trin?
Great, thank you. Thank you, Jody, and thank you. Congratulations. And we're celebrating the interpreters for Interpretation Day. Thank you all for being here. The Worker Empowerment Cabinet, as you know, advances the well-being of all Boston workers in the public and private sectors. Our goal includes setting the city's future policy and vision for workers, regulating, overseeing, and improving workplace conditions and health for workers, and expanding economic opportunities for workers through quality jobs, skills training, and career pipelines. Almost all workplace rights under both Massachusetts and United States law apply to all workers, regardless of immigration status. There have been some very high-profile cases recently of employers exploiting immigrant workers. Tonight's webinar was organized in response because we know that when workers know their rights, they are empowered to exercise them. Over the course of the next 90 minutes, you will hear from experts, have an opportunity to ask all your questions, and learn how to get support on issues you face in the workplace. I want to thank our Worker Center partners, the Chinese Progressive Association, Brazilian Worker Center, Matahari Women's Worker Center, and the Massakosh Immigrant Worker Center. We know you are on the front lines, and thank you for being right here tonight and for the work you do to support immigrant workers in Boston. I also want to thank our speakers from the Greater Boston Legal Services, the Attorney General's Office, the Department of Labor, and OSHA. We appreciate your partnership. I also want to thank our partners in the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement. Thank you all for your hard work and your expertise. And lastly, I want to thank our staff team, Jody Sugarman-Brosen, who's Deputy Chief of the Worker Empowerment, Tyrone Williams, Shanique Williams, and Monique, who are all great staff in putting this tremendous resource and tool together for you all. We look forward to partnering with you. As you know, this is the very first step in which we are reaching out and supporting workers. If you have any great ideas or thoughts about how we can expand our reach or be a greater service and resource to you, feel free to reach out to any of us and our staff. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Trin. And as Trin mentioned, we are very fortunate to have partnered tonight with several worker centers in the city of Boston. We want to give each of them just a minute to introduce themselves and the services that they provide for immigrant workers. So thank you. Lorraine, writer from Brazilian Worker Center, is here with us. Could you say a little bit about the services you provide?
Sure, thank you, Jody. Hi, everyone. My name is Lorraine Heiter. I'm the Immigrant Defense and the Domestic Workers' Rights Coordinator at the Brazilian Worker Center. Since 1995, the Brazilian Worker Center has been capacitating workers, immigrant workers especially, to learn about workplace rights, immigration, health equity, health and safety. And besides to that, we also have some programs dedicated to youth and to become more leadership about them. Aside to that as well, BWC had a crucial part implementing and passing the new law who allow thousands in Massachusetts to drive without and regardless immigration status. So thank you so much. Feel free to check us in our website and social media to check more about our programs. Thank you so much, Jody.
Thank you, Lorraine. And next slide, please. I want to introduce Francisca Sepulveda from the Massachusetts Immigrant Worker Center. Massakosh Immigrant Worker Center, sorry.
Yeah, hi, thank you, Jody. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. So Massakosh is the Massachusetts Coalition for Occupational Safety and Health. We are a coalition that brings together workers and allies to organize and defend safe and healthy jobs and communities. And we have different programs. We have a youth program for teenagers. We have our Immigrant Worker Center. We do union education and organizing. We have a Healthy Schools initiative, and we also provide support services for families of fallen workers, so workers that have lost their lives on the job. And finally, we also provide training and technical assistance to workers that need support at work. So please look for our organization on social media. Our website is right there. If you need help, if you have an issue at work, please call our hotline. Our number is 617-505-8940, and we can help you and provide assistance. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Fran. And next, Karen Chen from the Chinese Progressive Association. Karen?
Thank you, Jody and Trin. My name is Karen Chen. I'm the Executive Director with the Chinese Progressive Association. So the Chinese Progressive Association is a multi-issue coalition. So the Worker Center is one of our programs. And the Worker Center was founded in 1987 by Chinese garment workers. And the workers at the time, I feel like it's important for workers to have a place to get to know each other, to learn about our rights at the workplace, and to take collective action. So actually in our Chinese name is actually, the Workers Mutual Support Center. So we really value mutual support between workers, not just Chinese workers, but workers of different race and ethnicity. And then also we value collective action and solidarity. So we look forward to taking collective actions and act in solidarity with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And last but certainly not least, Ana Cipoleta from Matahari's Women's Worker Center. Ana?
Hola, buenas noches, y mi nombre es Ana Cipoleta.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ana Cipoleta. I am leader and head of the committee at Matahari Women Workers Center. We are an organization that fights for the rights of workers and those who are working in restaurants. We support the immigrant community with campaigns in order to end wage theft and abuse in the workplace with the history of necessity in our community. Friends, neighbors, and family, we can organize ourselves together to create safe spaces and to create good initiatives for our community. We have learned the importance of being able to communicate in our language, and we have access more immigrant workers with support with language access. If you would like to know a little bit more about our work, you can visit us on our website, www.mataharijustice.org, and you can also visit our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter platforms. We are going to put our phone number and more information in the chat. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you to all the worker centers who partnered with us this evening to help outreach to workers and for your work in partnership with the city. We really appreciate it. I now want to introduce Monique Nguyen, who is the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement, and we are lucky to have Monique with us this evening. Monique?
Hello, everyone. We can spotlight. It's perfect that I'm right after Matahari. That's where I was able to learn so much about the possible leadership of people who are have the shared struggles of how they're able to build power. So thank you so much for Matahari and all the worker centers I've been able to organize with over the years. And I'm just here to introduce the Mayor's Office for Immigrant Advancement. Our office is 25 years old, and we have been here to support mayors in supporting the immigrant community as we grow and thrive in Boston. And people might be like startled to find out that there's actually 200,000 immigrants in the city of Boston. That's almost 1/4 or 1/3 of our population. So we ensure that the well-being of the immigrants here and working with city departments and nonprofit sector, like community-based organizations and businesses to support the advancement of the immigrant community. Our department and our entire administration supports the immigrant community, and then we are your partners in exercising your rights as workers. I just want to reiterate that because oftentimes people think that government is not supportive of people, especially who are undocumented. I must say that that's far from the truth, especially under this administration, that regardless of your immigration status, we want to support you to make sure that you get access to the rights and potential of everything that all other constituents get in the city of Boston. And please know that we are here for you as a department. over the years, I've worked with hundreds of workers and then who have faced the same struggle. And they are oftentimes encouraged to learn that they are not the only ones. Oftentimes, if you are a person that's being exploited, you think that you are shamed and you're going through this alone. And please know that even me as myself as a young worker, I was exploited myself. And over time, when I learned my rights and learn with other people in the community and other organizations, that I wasn't the only one, I was able to help make change. And I'm hoping that this could be a pathway for you to be connected to other workers and other departments and a whole city that supports you. Without further ado, please move forward with other know your rights and information that that's being presented here today.
Thank you so much, Monique, and thank you so much to the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement for partnering with Worker Empowerment on this webinar tonight. We're really happy to be learning from you all and partnering with you all. Next, we have a panel of experts who are going to give some brief presentations on immigrant workers' rights. And after that, we will have time for questions and answers. You can see at the bottom of your screen a Q&A. You can feel free to enter your questions into the Q&A, and we will be sure to be answering all questions at the end of the presentation. So I'm really happy to have with us this evening Audrey Richardson from Greater Boston Legal Services. Audrey, I'll hand it over to you.
Apologies, the mute problem. Good evening, everybody. My name is Audrey Richardson. I'm with the Employment Law Unit of Greater Boston Legal Services. We're a nonprofit organization that provides free legal representation to low-income people, in the case of my unit, in workers' rights cases. And we have a particular especially in the rights and concerns and issues and opportunities for immigrant and especially undocumented workers. As some of you may know, some of the inspiration, unfortunately, for this webinar came from the Stash's Pizza case that has gotten a lot of attention recently as an extreme example of an employer using threats of deportation and violence against undocumented immigrant workers to force them to work for him under illegal working conditions and without paying them properly as the law required. This case has really highlighted how important it is for immigrant workers to know their rights and to know what kinds of support from worker centers, legal organizations like mine, and government agencies what kind of support is available, and what kinds of opportunities and benefits might be also available for workers who speak up and come forward in these kinds of cases. So if you want to move the screen forward. Well, it's already been said, almost all workplace rights in Massachusetts and under Massachusetts and United States law apply to all workers, regardless of immigration status. Keep going. There are all kinds of rights that this covers. Certainly to be paid on time and correctly, including the minimum wage and overtime pay that you'll hear more about, to work without being treated differently because of, among other things, your race, your national origin, your sex, your religion, your sexual orientation or your age, and in many cases, your disability, to work without being harassed, without sexual harassment on the job, to be able to join together with your coworkers to organize and ask for improvements to your pay or working conditions, to work in a safe and healthy workplace. And if you're injured at work, to be able to report that injury, to get medical care, and to file a workers' compensation claim. Keep going. A few other relatively recent rights under Massachusetts law are to receive paid family and medical leave under most circumstances, to earn sick time that may be paid if your employer is big enough, and certainly to work voluntarily without being forced to work through threats of harm. There also are restrictions on when youth under the age of 18 can work and what kinds of work they can do for safety. But one key exception, just to let folks know, for undocumented immigrants is that if you don't have work authorization, you can't receive unemployment benefits. But all those other rights I listed are available to all, regardless of immigration status. Keep going. A really important thing for everybody, but especially immigrants and especially undocumented immigrants to know is that retaliation is illegal and an employer cannot take any kind of harmful action against you for asserting any of your workplace rights. And illegal retaliation includes things like calling or even threatening to call immigration or the police, threatening to get a worker deported, threatening a worker or their family with physical harm or any type of harm, really. And of course, firing a worker or reducing their pay or hours because they have asserted their rights. Keep going. There are some benefits and opportunities and ways that workers can be protected when they come forward. So workers who file a workplace rights complaint or provide support for a government investigation may be able to receive immigration protections. There's a new Department of Homeland Security program that provides deferred action and work authorization for workers who are involved in a workplace-related government investigation. There are also certain types of visas, a U visa for victims of crime or a T visa for victims of trafficking, forced labor, that are available to folks who come forward and to who support government investigations. Okay, so people are here to help. Obviously, the worker centers that are sponsoring this event, who we are honored to be able to collaborate with. We're also honored to collaborate with government agencies such as the Massachusetts Attorney General's Office and the U.S. Department of Labor. And there are my own and other organizations that provide free legal representation. So resources are out there, opportunities and benefits are out there, and rights are existent regardless of your immigration status.
Thank you, Audrey. Up next, we have Cindy Molina, an investigator in the Fair Labor Division in the Office of Attorney General Andrea Campbell. Cindy?
Thanks, Jody. Hi, everybody. My name is Cindy Molina, and I will be giving you a very brief introduction on some of the rights that we at the Office of Attorney General's office cover. Cover the next slide, please. Okay, so just to give you some very brief information on what the AGO does advocate and protect the rights of all of the residents of Massachusetts, and as you will probably hear several times tonight, that is irrespective of immigration status. They do several things such as protecting consumers, combating fraud, corruption, investigating and prosecuting crimes, and protecting the environment and worker rights, which is what we're here for today. Yep. Now, how do we do this? We do a number of things. We do investigations, such as what I do, and then there's enforcement of the laws, prevention, as well as policy. And for any of you guys wondering, the AGO is located in several places throughout the state of Massachusetts. They're in Boston, New Bedford, Springfield, as well as Worcester. So if you want to walk in and speak with one of the investigators or somebody in person for the Fair Labor Division, you're welcome to do so at any of these regions. There will be offices there and people that can attend to you in person. If you would like to also file a complaint in person, that's also possible. And this is just a very quick disclaimer. The AGO does not provide legal advice. We are here mostly as a resource to advocate for your rights. So at any point you are welcome to call the hotline for the Fair Labor Division or file a complaint, which I will be popping in some of the numbers as well as the links for that, but we cannot provide you any advice on what to do. We can only serve as a resource to advocate for your rights. Okay, so just some information here on the minimum wage. In January, the minimum wage did go up to $15 per hour for all workers. There is an exception for agricultural workers who earn $8 an hour. And for those of you who do not know, the minimum wage posters are required to be hung up at all locations and are supposed to be accessed by all workers. And that's the poster that you can see there on the right. That minimum wage is for all workers. Of course, there are a couple of exceptions which we can get into. For restaurant and service employees, you are to be getting paid what is called the service rate, which is $6.75 per hour. However, it is important to note that the minimum wage of $15 an hour still applies. If you receive tips, those tips plus your pay rate should make up $15 per hour. So it is extremely important that you keep track of your tips and your pay rate and do the math and make sure that it's adding up to $15 per hour. If your tips are not bringing you up to $15 per hour, your employer must make up the difference. So do keep track of that. Another very important thing to note for tips is that managers cannot partake in the tip pool. The tip pool should only be accessed by service employees, meaning anybody that has a customer service facing role, but any management or owners of the business should not be partaking in that tip pool for you. So do keep note of your pay stubs and make sure that you are getting paid at least $15 an hour, as that is what you're entitled to. And overtime, as many of you guys are aware, you are supposed to be making the overtime rate, which is 1.5 times your hourly rate for any hours that are worked over 40 hours a week. For those of you that are getting paid on a bi-weekly basis, it's important to note that those 40 hours apply to a weekly time period. So if you are working more than 40 hours in a week, anything over 40 should be getting paid at the hourly rate, regardless of how often you are getting paid. There are some exceptions for overtime, but there is always federal laws that also cover overtime. So if you ever have any questions as to whether or not you are exempt from overtime, you are always welcome to contact us and we can give you some resources that you can either refer to or the answer if we have it ourselves. And travel time is also very important. Travel time between home and work is not paid. However, if you travel during the workday, it should be paid. So for instance, a cleaning employee, if you're traveling between locations, that travel period should be included as compensable time. And any travel expenses that you incur during the workday travel should also be paid by your employer. Important. Next slide, please. Thank you. And lastly, the meal break is also very important. You are entitled to an unpaid 30-minute break after 6 hours of work. You must be free to leave the workplace. If you are required to stay at your location of employment, that is not a requirement that should be in place. You should be allowed to be free and do whatever it is you want during those unpaid 30 minutes. You can voluntarily give up that meal break if you want to, but it must be paid for. So if you are giving up your meal break, please make sure that you're being paid for your meal break and for that time that you are working.
Thank you so much, Cindy. We really appreciate your presentation and information. And I'll let folks know that we will be posting the recordings and slide decks on our website, so you will be able to get the information, phone numbers after this webinar. Next up, we are very lucky to have Scott Miller from the U.S. Department of Labor, Boston Regional Solicitor's Office. Scott, I will pass it off to you.
Great, thank you. I'm Scott Miller. I work for the U.S. Department of Labor, Office of the Solicitor. We are the attorneys for the U.S. Department of Labor. Today, I'm going to focus in on the Fair Labor Standards Act, or the FLSA, as you see on the slide, which is the primary federal law that protects wages for workers. And there are primarily two entities at the Department of Labor that are most involved in enforcing this law. One is the Wage and Hour Division. That is an agency of the U.S. Department of Labor that investigates violations of the FLSA and then attempts to resolve any findings they have with an employer. If that's unsuccessful, we may get involved. The Solicitor's Office advises the Wage and Hour Division on their investigations, and we bring lawsuits to enforce any violations of the FLSA. Next slide, please. So everyone has been saying this, and I'm glad I'm going to say it again. Under the FLSA, the FLSA protects workers regardless of immigration status. So immigration status is actually irrelevant to whether someone is protected by the FLSA. And in fact, the wage and hour division that investigates these violations does not inquire into the immigration status of the workers that they interview because it is not relevant to whether someone is entitled to their rights under the statute. Next slide, please. Here's just a basic bullet points of some of the major highlights of what the Fair Labor Standards Act protects. Under the federal law, the minimum wage is $7.25 per hour. And we also enforce overtime, which is, as Cindy said, it's 1.5 times the regular rate that an employee earns for all hours worked over 40 in a week. We frequently bring lawsuits and get compensation for employees who are denied minimum wage and overtime. That can include back wages plus an equal amount in liquidated damages, depending on the circumstances. I also want to, so there's also some child labor protections, which are similar to what's already been discussed. Employers have to keep records of employees' payment, wages and hours. And there is an anti-retaliation protection under the Fair Labor Standards Act. I want to focus a little bit or talk a little bit about that. Our office has been very active in the last couple of years in litigating cases where workers have been retaliated against, in particular where Wage and Hour is investigating unpaid wages, and an employee or an employer or another person may threaten to call immigration authorities, to call the police, to do other things, to tell workers to lie to the Department of Labor, do things that are under this law, under the FLSA, unlawful. They constitute retaliation. And we have a couple pretty good tools in our toolbox for that. When appropriate, we will go in immediately or as quickly as possible to get an injunction that will get a court order that says that the employer cannot further retaliate once we've detected it. And then there's also, once the lawsuit runs its course, potentially liquidated damages that we can recover on behalf of employees. Next slide, please. So here are some resources. This is places to go to get more information. Just briefly, the Wage and Hour Division is a certifying agency for UNT visas. So the Wage and Hour Division doesn't issue UNT visas. That's done by USCIS, but we do. We are a resource you can come to for a certification that someone has been a victim, a qualifying victim, that would entitle you to include that in an application for a URT visa. And then lastly, the last bullet point of the resource is DOL letters of interest. This is something I want to highlight. There is the Department of Labor will consider requests from workers to support basically a request to the Department of Homeland Security for prosecutorial discretion when it comes to immigration relief. So a worker can ask that we essentially go to the Department of Homeland Security and say that we are interested in them using some sort of prosecutorial discretion where there is a labor dispute or a wage dispute in a workplace, and you can get more information about that at the link there. And last slide is just my contact information if you have any other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. And again, if folks have questions, you can feel free to enter them into the Q&A as we go, and we will be sure to get to as many questions as we can after the presentations. We are also very lucky to have with us this evening, also from the Department of Labor and the Occupational Safety Health Administration. We have Jim Mulligan, who is our area director. And we will start with Jim, and we also have a regional administrator, Galen Blanton. But Jim, I believe you're up first.
Yep, thanks, Jody. So first of all, I apologize for not having the fanciest slides. I thought information was more important. So recognize the Department of Labor, OSHA, has 3 area offices in Massachusetts, Braintree, Andover, Massachusetts, and Springfield, Massachusetts. I've put the number for the Braintree office. We cover all of Boston and Suffolk County. I've also included the 800 number there. So if people need to reach OSHA, they can call 24 hours a day to 800-321-OSHA. I think it's been a real blessing in the last year. I've been able to hire a number of people, and included in those hires, I've been able to bring on someone who speaks Brazilian Portuguese and a number of Spanish-speaking compliance officers. So if somebody wants to call and speak and bring up a complaint, they have a hazard they want to talk about, and they speak Spanish or Portuguese, Braintree is the place to call right now. Every employee, regardless of status, has a right to a safe workplace. I don't care, honestly, about status. We will never ask. We just want to make sure that workers have an understanding of their rights. Simple rights. You have a worker has a right to speak to an OSHA compliance officer privately. They have a right to report an injury. They have a right to be trained in a language they understand. I think it's, if you go to OSHA.gov, www.osha.gov, you can find many ways of filing a complaint. You can find out all the phone numbers for the different area offices. So recognizing workers move, workers cross state lines. So if something happens in Providence, Rhode Island, or they end up in New Hampshire, they can always go to OSHA.gov, find a way to contact the local office. They can go there to file a complaint. I think it's very important workers understand they have a right to personal protective equipment, gloves, safety glasses, fall protection equipment, hearing protection, basic, very, very basic safety and health is where it's the foundation of what we do. I think it's very important to know that employees also under OSHA, under the OSHA Act of 1970, Section 11C is employees can't be retaliated against for making a safety and health complaint. Examples of an adverse action that might be taken for retaliating against an employee: reduced pay, less hours, fired or laid off. Again, if an employee wants to make a complaint, a whistleblower complaint, you can go online to OSHA.gov, you can visit an area office, you can call the area office and file the complaint. In the last couple of years, OSHA did have an employer who worked with law enforcement to have an injured employee arrested outside of his office after telling this employee that he could come and get some money to help him sort of tide himself over while he was waiting for some other insurance of some sort. Well, the employee was arrested, and eventually OSHA developed a whistleblower case that ended up in federal district court. That case ended up, the Department of Labor was successful, and I believe the final settlement was $600,000 to be paid to the employee. It was a terrible case called Terra Construction. But if people have questions, the phone number that I put on there, you'll get the area office. Please call anytime. I look forward to working with people. Thank you, Jody.
Thanks so much, Jim. Thank you so much. And next, I'd like to introduce the regional administrator for OSHA, Galen Blanton. We're really, it's great to have you here with us this evening, Galen.
I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to talk about something relatively new with OSHA. So both Audrey and Scott mentioned UNT visas, and typically back in, I believe, 2011, Wage and Hour got the right to certify for UNT visas. Well, as of March 30th, OSHA has joined Wage and Hour, and we are now a certifying agency. And basically that just means that we will provide a certification for a worker who is filing for a UNT visa. We don't make the decisions on the UNT visas. We just play a small part of that. If you do want to request a certification, there's an email address that hopefully we can drop into the chat. It is OSHA-UTV, it's V as in Victor, _certification@dol.gov. Those requests will be routed to the appropriate person in the location where you're at. If you have any questions or would like more information, there's a lot of information at whistleblowers, that's whistleblowers with an S.gov. That is OSHA's whistleblower webpage, and they are the ones who will be helping to process the certifications. So it's very exciting to have OSHA being part of this, to ensure workplaces are safe for all, and to provide a path to citizenship for people who are victims of crimes in the workplace. And that's it for me. Thank you, Jody.
Thank you, Galen. And I did put those links in the chat for folks. I want to thank you very much. I want to thank our speakers for really clearly defining for folks what your rights are on the job, your rights to be paid for the hours you work, for a safe workplace, to not be retaliated against should you stand up for your own rights. We do have a number of questions coming in, and I'm going to start to ask those questions, but again, feel free to use the Q&A function. If you are having a hard time using that Q&A function, you can, let's see, we can open the chat at some point, but it does seem that Q&A questions are coming in on that through Q&A at this point. So I'm going to start. The first question is, can a contractor, and I believe they mean independent contractor, work more than 5 years in the same company? Can one of our panelists answer that? Is it legal for someone who is an independent contractor to work for 5 years in the same company?
Jody, I'll take a shot at it. I think the standard answer from the Department of Labor, is it depends. And we will always ask, as if I sent someone out, if I found somebody who said, well, I've worked here for 5 years, and they say they're an independent contractor, I would be asking questions related to who provides the materials, who provides the tools, is there a profit and loss opportunity? I would ask about, who sets the hours, right? Does the employer tell you you need to be here at 7 a.m. and work till 3:30? I would ask questions to really determine whether that person was truly an independent contractor or was simply being, what we see a lot is, employers are 1099ing workers, trying to call them independent contractors when in reality they're employees.
And who should someone who is being treated as an independent contractor, who believes that they are employees and not contractors, who is the best person to contact to get support for that? Is that the Department of Labor, Attorney General, either?
Well, I think it probably depends on what, if the primary issue is a wage issue or a safety issue. The different laws that we've talked about today all have slightly different tests for when someone is an employee, meaning that they're protected by these statutes, as opposed to when they're considered an independent contractor. And the essential difference is that an employee has an employment relationship, is economically dependent on the employer, whereas an independent contractor really is someone who has their own business, and it's just a contractual relationship. The test gets a lot more complicated than that, and it may vary from statute to statute, but that's essentially it. So it doesn't necessarily turn on how long someone has been working with an employer, but certainly the longer that someone has been working for an employer, the more it starts to look like it might be an employment relationship. If there's anything if a concern is specifically related to safety and health or wages, I would encourage you to contact OSHA or the Wage and Hour Division at the Department of Labor.
And actually, it's actually a good point, Scott, too, because if somebody's worked for someone for 5 years and they're an independent contractor, but they don't work for anybody else, right? Then that would seem to point to more of an employee-employer relationship. But there's a lot of factors that go into it.
One thing that also might be worth mentioning is that under Massachusetts law, which is a even stronger standard than federal law, you cannot, if you're working in the usual type of business that the company does or the business does, you actually can't, you're supposed to be considered or classified as an employee and not an independent contractor. So a contractor is really under Massachusetts law applicable when it's a different kind of work. Say you're a cleaning company coming in to clean a restaurant, that could be a contractor. But if you are a painter working for a painting company, you can't be a contractor. You have to be an employee under Massachusetts law.
And in that case, Jody, if they have a question regarding whether they're an independent contractor under mass law, then they are more than welcome to also contact the Attorney General's office. You can always contact the Fair Labor Division hotline. They usually are pretty amazing at letting you know whether or not you should be treated as an independent contractor under the Massachusetts law, and whether you are entitled to the benefits that an employee would be entitled to, such as that, earned sick leave, meal breaks, overtime paid, that kind of stuff.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Okay, our second question. I am a salary exempt employee. We are really short staffed, and over the 80 hours of the pay period, I worked 140 hours. I requested to get my overtime paid from the employer, but the employer refused. Is this legal?
I think this is another one where there's going to be a difference between federal law and perhaps under state law. Under federal law, first of all, I would just caution that to think about whether someone is salary exempt from overtime. There's a number of different exemptions, but typically there is depending on which exemption is being considered here, there's usually a salary test. So one part of the test that has to be met for the exemption is that someone has a guaranteed salary above, for the purpose of the Fair Labor Standards Act, above $684 per week. Then there's usually a second aspect, which is a duties test. So sometimes people think that they're exempt just because they have a salary, but they may not meet the duties test. For example, if it's a managerial exemption, they may not have the duties of a manager that meets the exemption. So I just caution to think about whether someone really is exempt. But under the federal law, if someone is exempt, there's no limit on the number of hours that someone can work. In fact, the federal law doesn't limit the number of hours that adults can work. It just says that if you're not exempt, you have to get paid overtime for the hours over 40.
Thanks, Scott. Cindy, did you want to add something from state law?
No, it's very similar under state law. There are a number of exceptions that apply as well as to what employees can and cannot make overtime. If you feel like you are not an exempt employee, you're always welcome to contact us and we'll let you know whether or not you're an exempt employee. But depending on the industry that you work in and the type of job that you're performing, you may be exempt from overtime. But I think I would need a little bit more information as to the kind of position that they hold, as well as the industry in which they work, to know whether they're exempt under mass law.
Thank you. Our next question. I provided services to a company and then opened a complaint against them in the Fair Labor Division. The owner of the company is accusing me, defaming me, and threatening me. How do I get this? How do I get protection and deferred action?
So if the complaint was filed under the Fair Labor Division for Massachusetts, they are more than welcome to file another complaint with us under retaliation this time, and the investigation will immediately be picked back up to investigate for retaliation, as that is also a statute that we enforce. We also do participate in the statement of interest, which is something that employees can speak to us with if that's something that they want to get from us, and we can also sponsor statement of interest for those employees. But if the complaint was filed with us, please go ahead and file a complaint with us. We will immediately open up an investigation for retaliation on your behalf.
Great. Thank you. Our next question, can someone with a startup business claim for unemployment benefits if they are not earning? Audrey, maybe you can answer that question.
I don't know that I can answer it. It's pretty specific and narrow. But I don't think well, let me say just, I mean, it is true that if you are the, if it's your business, if you're an owner of the business, you're not going to be able to get unemployment benefits. I don't think so, but I would need some more information to be able to really answer that.
Great.
There's certain circumstances that you might.
Okay. And for, just correct me if I'm wrong, but Greater Boston Legal Services does have resources to help people with unemployment questions. So if they were to follow up afterwards.
Yes, we definitely do unemployment benefits work. And I just, depending a bit on kind of the eligibility for our services, that sometimes can affect whether we would be able to take a case, but we definitely can do an intake and see if it's something that we can advise or help with.
Great. Great. We don't have other questions in the Q&A, and just in case people are having a hard time with the Q&A chat, before I wrap up questions and answers, I'm going to open the chat to everyone. If you are unable to use the Q&A function, but still had a question and you'd like to put that in the chat, we'll be watching the chat right now for a minute before we wrap up. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions. And for our other folks who are helping with questions on Facebook, it looks like we've answered all of our questions.
Hey, Jody,
yes.
It looks like there's a question in the Q&A about an H-1B visa.
Yes, that was a specific question. Let me see. Yes, I have an H-1B visa and my wife an H-4 visa. She did a bachelor's in commerce and accounts and has lots of IT training. But as US law, she can't work on an H-4B visa. Can she work and get EID? That sounds very specific. We weren't sure if anybody on this panel could answer that question.
It's definitely not OSHA.
Okay. And I do see we have a question. Let's see. In the chat, I worked in a store where they send money transfers. I made a mistake and sent money to Mexico because I was a victim of fraud. Now I'm paying my boss month to month until I get to the sum of that money. That was the total fraud. I'm paying cash to her and she doesn't give a receipt. I don't know if folks are able to answer that question. I'm not sure that's a...
Yeah, I think this would, at least for us at the AGO office, fall under a deduction issue where additional money is being deducted from a worker's paycheck, which is not legal. So I would actually encourage you to please go ahead and file a complaint with the Massachusetts Attorney General's office, Fair Labor Division, and click off deductions and inform them that you are getting something deducted from your pay due to a mistake that you made as an employee, and hopefully we can take it from there.
Great. And I hear that Fran from the Immigrant Worker Center has talked to this worker and there's going to be help support them as they approach the Attorney General's office. So great. Thank you, Fran. We also have heard that from Courtney that they will be in the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Advancement. They'll be scheduling a consultation with that person. So thank you very much. Moria is going to follow up. I don't see any other questions at this point. Let's see.
There's one in the Q&A that popped in. Oh,
How should live-in hours be calculated? Oh, this looks like a domestic worker, maybe a question for Cindy around the domestic worker Bill of Rights. How should live-in hours be calculated and paid? Someone who's a live-in aide who's working 24 hours a day.
Yep. There are specific regulations under the Domestic Worker Bills of Rights. I do want you to know that you are entitled to the same rights as every other worker, minimum wage, overtime, earned sick leave. You should have a written agreement with your employer as to what your rights are for a rest period, when you're allowed to rest, when you're supposed to be working. If you are working more than 16 hours in a week, all of that needs to be in writing regarding what your responsibilities are, what your rest periods are. So if you do have some questions as to how that time should be calculated, or if you guys don't have that in writing, please go ahead and give the hotline a call, because that's going to come down to what those rest periods are when you're working and what types of responsibilities you are being made to perform during those rest periods. So it's a little bit specific and a little bit complicated when it comes to the domestic workers' rights, as we need a little bit more information to know when you are being allowed to take a break and what you're allowed to do during those breaks, so that we can give you some guidelines there.
Great, thank you, Cindy. Great. I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you very much. I want to thank once again our panelists who gave great information and answered all the questions that came in. For folks who still maybe have questions afterwards, please feel free to contact our office. Monique, if you can switch to the last slide. Can feel free to reach out to us at workers@boston.gov. We have recorded these sessions and we've recorded them in each of the languages. I want to thank again our interpreters, especially for being with us on Interpreter Appreciation Day. We really appreciate your time and helping to make sure that all of these great presentations were understood by all the workers in attendance tonight. I really appreciate again our partnership with Moya and the worker centers. Thank you all. We will
多謝你哋所有，我哋會
in the recordings on our website, and we also will follow up with everybody who registered with information on how to reach all the panelists who spoke this evening in their offices so that they can get support and help should they need it moving forward. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it, and have an excellent evening.
Thanks, Jody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
And with that,
Great
Shanique, I think you can close us off.